A war for the future that you don't realize has been going on for a long time. Who are the participants? Corporations, states, and the richest dynasties. What is the nature of this rivalry? All actors are creating their own narrative, a narrative that is changing the world before our eyes. A narrative is a narrative in the broad sense that not only answers the question, what happened, but also provides answers about the causes and consequences of the events in question. Any narrative creates a certain image of the future. These images are what provide humanity with a direction for change. There are quite a few narratives, but let's look at a few examples. In October 2021, at a Facebook conference, it was announced that the company would be renamed Meta. From that point on, the term meta-universe, previously known primarily among gamers, became a trendy, commonly used, and well-known concept. With Zuckerberg's light hand, analysts, futurologists, and journalists began to consider the meta-universe as the future of the entire internet. His words sounded very convincing. I believe that the meta-universe is the next chapter in the development of the internet. The internet became mobile at one time, and I think the next stage of development is the meta-universe. There's another example, the colonization narrative that Elon Musk espouses. Musk believes that the work of all his companies is an expression of love for humanity. Tesla is accelerating the transition to sustainable energy. SpaceX is trying to ensure the long-term survival of humanity by creating a multi-planet species. Neuralink is channeling the power of artificial intelligence to fix brain malfunctions. The Boring Company is trying to deal with traffic jams that are a living hell for most people. Musk states, only a small percentage of people who want to fly to Mars will be able to realize their dreams. We want to make flights affordable for everyone who wants to visit Mars. Beyond that, he periodically says things like this: humanity will survive for a few hundred more years if we don't become an interplanetary civilization. If we become interplanetary and then interstellar, our civilization will last millions of years. If not, it will probably end within a few hundred years. Then there's the Earth Harmony narrative of Amazon creator Jeff Bezos, who created the Bezos Earth Fund, an environmental charity, in February 2020, and has been touting at every turn that climate change is the biggest threat to our planet. I want to work with others to maximize known ways and find new ways to combat the devastating effects of climate change on our planet, where we all live. This global initiative will fund scientists, activists, non-governmental organizations, and any effort that offers a real opportunity to preserve and protect the natural world. The Earth is the only thing that belongs to us all together. Let's all work together to protect it. Apple CEO Tim Cook believes that very soon life without augmented reality will be unthinkable. Apple is doing well with its narrative. It was formulated back in the 1990s by Steve Jobs. It boils down to the fact that the new generation of digital technologies will allow people to perfectly realize their unique potential and express their individuality. The slogan "Think Different" perfectly captures the essence of Apple's narrative. To inspire more trust in this narrative, Apple told stories about famous people who actually thought differently and what they accomplished. Google has literally become a household name, and the word to Google, that is create query, is used by everyone. It's a mind grab not at the level of narrative, but at the level of anthropostructure, the level of language. I listed the narratives that corporations broadcast, but I said nothing about state narratives, about propaganda. I haven't said anything at all about the oldest provider of meaning, the church, because all of this is worthy of a separate conversation. You and I live in a world of people. People live in a world of ideas. Ideas form arches, arches form plots, and plots form narratives. Everyone can find himself if he understands the drama that unfolds through him, if he analyzes his desires and tries to understand what really motivates him, if he tries to understand what role he plays in this large-scale play. You are actors, extras, just a tree or a stone inside an already prepared plot, and no one asked you about it. You have simply been brought to this stage. Each of you should think about the logic of ideas, ideas sewn into yourselves, into your loved ones, into those who you like, and those who disgust you. As you begin to learn how to manage ideas, you will begin to create your own ideology, the logic of the ideal. However, if you wave your hand, if you think I am crazy, you will remain in the position of a slave or even a resource. You don't really want an iPhone. You've been sold one. You are part of a mass production and consumption machine. If you don't think about what bigger thing you are a part of, you will be used. You will be manipulated. Remember, we are all part of something bigger, so it is better to be part of something bigger called family. Here I am obligated to ask you a simple question. Do you think you have a family? Some will probably say no, but most, I'm sure, will say yes. But can you answer the qualifying question? How is your family different from a pack, a pride, a swarm, or a parliament? How is your family different from a group of related animals? What are the specific differences? Historically, it is very easy to explain the emergence of the family. Together, it is easier to survive, get food, build up influence, and one day gain power. Any strong family, dynasty one day asks the question, what share of the world do we claim? This question has the power to change your life too, and a little later you will understand why. Families used to be created not by children in love, but by forward-thinking parents. Marriage for love is about 150 years old. Today, however, most people reproduce a playful type of family. Thus, serial monogamy has won, in which people change partners from time to time. From time to time, experience a variety of feelings, and then again do not know what to do with their lives, because everything is repeated. Fathers used to be responsible for marriage. They were the ones who decided with whom their child should marry. Experienced patriarchs made decisions and acted out of concern for security, strengthening the family's position in society and development. When modern man tries to make sense of his life and relationships, he often asks the question, why? Why did we get together? Why are we still together? He looks for the reason in the past and almost completely ignores the future. The question, why are we together? As unfair and inhumane as a marriage of convenience may seem today, it answers the question, why do we get married? Why? The question of the future, the question that makes us think about what we continue to do. When someone in a family begins to ask the question, why, everything can gradually have a meaning. But at one point you will ask a different question, a question that can be unprincipled, disarming for most parents. Why do we have kids? If people don't ask themselves that question, they're just moving along the biological fine-tuned rails made by evolution. Let's face it, most people, when having a child, are trying to fill an inner gaping void, to bring someone into this world that they could care for, that they could love. Parents bring into this world a living organism, doomed in its own way to a hard collision with chaos, to search for a foothold in a constantly changing world, doomed to pain and suffering, but nevertheless, capable of finding its own special happiness someday. Some refuse to give an answer as to why they want a child, while others seem to do everything in a meaningful way. They perceive the child as a project, find for him a large number of sections. Music school, the best education. Here you can't help but think of an industry that literally produces pop idols and Olympic champions. Both are cultivated to bring dividends in the form of money or awards. A man with this attitude toward his children is an entrepreneur. The child is his project. Most of you are clearly not comfortable with the view of the family as a project. There is something human missing in this attitude toward the family. But what is human? Everything in life is based on whether or not you have a plan for your family, your child, and ultimately for yourself. If you don't have a plan for yourself and your family, you risk becoming a slave who has no idea of his slave fate, a slave, that is, resource of two very influential and very ancient corporations that have a plan for literally every person on earth. The first corporation is the state. For thousands of years, humans have fueled these leviathans, allowing them to scale and eventually collide with each other and kill people in endless wars. The second organization, even more ancient, is the gene. It is the gene that sets the basic directions for action. The most important thing for the gene is that you reproduce. In humans, the bond between parent and child is amazingly complex and amazingly strong. Parents can develop a kind of syndrome when breastfeeding a baby. The baby dictates when the parent sleeps and when not to. The infant is to some extent an aggressor or even rather a manipulator, someone who imposes, without realizing it, his will on another person. The defense mechanism of the parent's psyche is triggered, and he begins to love what he could not influence. British pediatrician and child psychoanalyst Donald Woods Winnicott says that it is natural. Waking up once again at night from the screams of a child, catch yourself thinking would press him to himself tighter, so that no more crying. Partly because of this specific Stockholm syndrome, parents begin to adore their children so madly. The inevitable emergence of the strongest attachment has been known for a long time. During the Enlightenment, the culture began the process of fighting the inner animal. This is why in many aristocratic families, a father did not see his child until he was 5 years old. This helped fathers to move past animal attachments and love the child as a being of reason. Throughout history, the family has been the foundation of any society, the very thing from which society is formed. But over time, mega-machine states have gradually gained strength as a counterbalance to family organizations. Family organizations and the state were sometimes one and the same, but they often competed. A clear example of this competition is criminal gangs, which most often form around a family and strengthen when the state weakens. But, as practice shows, the state is often stronger. Sooner or later, a thought, Agent Smith, enters the mind of the modern parent and says, "It's time for your child to go to kindergarten." In response, Ority takes the blue pill and sends the child to the care of the state machine. A little later, at age 6, the machine pretends to give you the child and asks the same question again. Do you have a plan for the child? If not, it's time for him to go to school. Everybody gives their kids to school. He keeps saying, "Don't step out of line blind." The parent swallows the blue pill again and puts the child in school. When the child turns 17, the system asks again, "So, any plans?" You again say no, or you say the kid is old enough to decide for himself. "Of course, he is," says the government machine. "He has options. College, university, girls can get married right away." This is where the Gene Corporation pushes to think hard. And for boys, there's the army. But if you imagine that a person has become abruptly aware of his situation, and he has a plan, for example, and he wants to talk to his child and involve him in the family business, he is very likely to fail, because for many years the meanings have been broadcast by people who represent the interests of the machine, that is, the state. In addition, the internet has participated in the formation, but not the parents. Let's look at an example. Imagine a parent who was able to win the social game, provide his family with everything they need, and now aims to give his children everything he didn't have. Wealthy people, often thinking about the development of their child, unlocking its potential, hire expensive, fluent in several languages nannies, who help the child from childhood to assimilate excellent language and behavioral norms, develop his erudition. Children of such parents do not go to kindergarten, and closer to the age of 20, the child returns to his parents. Those can offer him to engage in the family business, but the child can legitimately answer, "I do not want this. I want to be in the trend." And all because other meanings were put into the head of this once child during all this time. The state knows why it needs a person, how it can use him. It knows what he must believe in, what he must want, and what he must strive for. The state even knows where and how to bury the person. Everything has long since been calculated. Any one of us is born between two corporations, the evolutionary corporation and the state corporation, cultured in the zone of their full influence. The gene corporation realizes its plans by biological way, and the cultural one by linguistic way, creating a special set of ideas and concepts that form a picture of the world favorable to the state. The old world is trying to preserve itself, mutating in the same way as the gene. I think Richard Dawkins would call it all the war of genes and memes. And here we come back to the question, and where is anything human here? Ironically, the family as an organization is the only thing that allows something human to remain in the war between the two machines. As it turns out, there is not much humanity in our familiar surroundings. There is a lot of slavery and very little humanity at all. This issue is an attempt to open your eyes to something very important. Get ready, the most interesting is yet to come. In this issue, you will learn how to become human in the war of genes and memes, advertising, and propaganda. And what does it mean to be human? How is the attention economy organized and why is it dangerous? Why does a homeless person have power and you don't? Why are all rulers legalized bandits? And how do you break free from outside influences and create a real family? If you're close to what I do and want to support my work, give me a like, leave a comment, subscribe. The answer to the question of how to build a family and resist outside influences is hidden in the question that not so long ago every family asked itself. How much of the world do we claim to own? But what does it mean to own the world? Probably to be rich, you'll say. But no, if you have a lot of money, you own money, a sliver of paper with value only in a system of shared arrangements. But if you imagine that you have a coffee shop in every city in some country, to which motivated remote workers regularly go, that's definitely some fraction of the world. After all, you own a real economic asset. Such an asset is a business that has managed to attract at least someone's attention. Today is the attention economy after all. Neil Gaiman in his book American Gods perfectly illustrated how the attention economy works. In it, the old gods, in whom fewer and fewer people believe, lose their power, and the new gods, in whom people believe, are strengthened. There is a war of lifestyle corporations in the market today. Every big corporation, if it wants to survive, has to offer its image of a person. By creating an appealing image, the corporation literally captures people's attention, time, and money. Google, Apple, Meta, Amazon, and other companies are creating entire castes that are already fighting each other. The confrontation between fans of Android and Apple systems is proof of that. Clans have done the same and continue to do so. The richest families that, once sprang from one person. What makes family business empires interesting from an economic standpoint? The clans are resilient, stable, profitable because of the fact that they think about the product, not about increasing the value of their stock. In addition, those clans that play on the stock market pay dividends steadily. As I have said before, the only way to remain human in the war of genes and memes is to become part of a real family. But what does it mean to remain human? What does it even mean to be human? What is a human being? As physiologist Ivan Pavlov said, if you react to a stimulus, that is when you are insulted, you take offense. When you are stepped on, you get angry. You are not a human being. You are an animal, because you are guided by reflexes. What is a human being? It is the gap between stimulus and reaction, that space in which the will to choose arises. When you are pushed, you may not go to fight, reacting to the stimulus, but show depth of thinking, perceive what is happening to you in a multifactorial way. This is where different perceptual optics, different concepts, can help. Looking at someone who is yelling at you, you can interpret reality in different ways. Someone may be yelling because they have, as Eric Berne says, a stroking deficit. Through his yelling and aggressive interactions, he reminds himself that he exists. On the other hand, I may have hurt his inner dysfunctional child by my actions. On the third hand, says Nobel laureate Konrad Lorenz, we have an accumulation of aggression. On the other hand, I could have violated some rituals in which he exists, and this, by the way, is a manifestation of aggression on my part. You cannot become a human being. You have to become a human being all the time. We can learn to control ourselves. Those who have realized their slave position and decided to do something about it, create a family, then a clan, and then a dynasty. There is no way to gain personal sovereignty alone. Before that, we touched upon the question of what to do to a person who found himself between two fires, the fires of the genetic corporation and the state corporation. The answer lies in the creation of a real family. Building a family must begin with revision. Not to run away with thoughts at the moment when the whole world is ours, but to see what I already have at this moment. The life of any person and organization, and the family is an organization, unfolds on 3 levels, the understanding of which will change your perception of what you really are. Everything happens at the level of infrastructure, anthropostructure, and ultrastructure. Infrastructure is the level of processes, products, resources, objects, real estate, furniture, transportation, and machinery. This can also include, and we ourselves as humans. Anthropostructure is the world of language, communication, and social relations. Ultrastructure is the world of ideas, concepts, and meanings. Each person has something in the material world. Everyone has their own unique style of communication. Everyone has some picture of the world. All 3 of these levels are initially inherited from parents and the environment in general. Things are obviously acquired by parents, but language and worldview are formed under the influence of a large number of factors. These factors can be school, books, internet, movies, and friends. Most of us inherit infrastructure from our parents: an apartment, a car, books, or money. But inheritance at the level of anthropostructure or ultrastructure is most often not. Despite the fact that ideas are immortal as long as at least one carrier contains them, people most often do not create an ideological base for their loved ones. Most people don't ask themselves why they need a family, nor do they wonder who is manipulating them. Before we go any further, let's understand the meanings of the words I have used and will use in this issue. We will understand a lineage as a group of blood relatives descended from a common ancestor. Family will be understood not so much as a unit of society, but rather as an association tied to a common cause. We will discuss what it means to have a common cause a little later. The clan will be understood as a family with its own industrial, but what is much more important, ideological base. And dynasty will be understood as a clan that has managed to pass on its possessions for 4 generations. Why 4? This number is connected with the so-called curse of the 3rd generation. And it makes sense. Suppose a man from scratch decides to build a dynasty. At the start he has nothing, but by the end of his life, he manages to accumulate something. His son does not live in luxury, but in a certain wealth, so he has the opportunity to multiply the capital. If the 2nd generation has succeeded, the 3rd generation lives without denying itself anything, and naturally squanders all that it has gained. Therefore, the clan, which was able to overcome the great filter of the 3rd generation, becomes a dynasty. From such a classification, it becomes clear why not all relatives become members of the clan. The Romanov lineage is still going on, but the dynasty has long disappeared. The answer to the big giant main question for each family, why are we together, always becomes a family affair. So there is the Rockefeller family tree, their relatives who never owned anything and never will, and the Rockefeller clan that once owned the first oil monopoly, Standard Oil. Those who were in the Rockefeller lineage, but were not part of the clan, never came close to the table where family matters were decided. Conclusion: one needs to join a clan just like any other organization. All Rurikovich understood that they are heirs of great Rurik. Together with a clan, children inherit the whole attributes and instruction. They inherit the answer to a question: who we are, from where and where we go. To create a dynasty, you have to go back to the level of ultrastructure. A great contract must be made. A great contract is a contract with some idea. For example, the Rockefellers have a contract with Prometheus. They are Prometheans. The Medici family, who were the founding fathers of the Renaissance, the era that replaced the Dark Middle Ages, had a contract with God. But their God was alternative. They served him independently of the church. Medici, through their efforts, were able to put man at the center of the universe. They made the idea of man great. The rebuilding of Florence, the rebuilding of Venice, but most importantly, the creation of a special atmosphere and industry paved the way for the rapid development of culture. Cosimo de' Medici was the first to realize that it was patronage of the arts that would bring power and immortality to the family. He was a patron of the Renaissance's most prominent creators. On the money of the Medici clan created their masterpieces Brunelleschi, Donatello, Botticelli, Michelangelo, Raffaello Santi, Leonardo da Vinci, 2 queens of France, 4 popes, all from the Medici clan. To own the world is to own the minds of men. The main question is, what idea do we manifest through ourselves? The size of a family depends on how many people serve the same idea, speak a common, specially, and consciously developed language. And last but not least, how much infrastructure belongs to this family? Returning to the question of what should I do? One must take one's hands off one's spouse and children, if any, and ask oneself, do I have plans for myself? You need to find some big idea in the story and choose to pursue it. Take, for example, the ideas of Stoicism or Napoleon, Emperor Caligula. A family idea can present a moral code. What is good and what is bad for us in this ideology? The idea allows us to answer the question, what to do, and to do not in the object world, not at the level of profession. For example, we will be lawyers or dentists, but at the level of culture. The general idea is what helps us to perceive this world, helps us to acquire a certain structure of thinking. To find the main idea, the core, around which your ideology will be formed, you can use the list of 102 great ideas of the American philosopher Mortimer Adler. His list consists of words like God, eternity, time, war, will, desire, life and death, knowledge, love, courage, medicine, metaphysics, reason, happiness, justice, honor, emotion, evolution, language. Believe me, there are a lot of great words out there. The next thing to do is to take one or more of these words, put it on the family banner, and then, using all sorts of sources of information, begin the journey of discovery. What is love, for example? How to act out of love? It is not clear. The selected ideas are the ones to be dealt with. As you might have guessed, such consciousness in choosing the path of life has never been liked by the states. China has always had a very strong dynasticism. They lived where their ancestors were buried. They carried on their work, their traditions. And when one day messengers started coming from the empire to the Chinese clans and asking them to send their men to war, the family said no. What do you think the empire did? Declared war on families and began to destroy this cohesive system. No longer in China, but in Western culture, we find that the family is a union of two and no more. Today, married couples are breaking up. Corporations say to man, "You are an individual. You don't need anyone. Just keep consuming." Automation or splitting destroys even the rudiments in the family. The family is always above its members. In a true clan, there is always a common we. This is a very important point because in the clan, any issue is always solved collegially. It is decided at the table. In front of the chosen idea, all members of the clan are equal. If one person has power, it is no longer a clan. The man who concentrated power in his hands is nothing more than a dominant male, a monkey, in case of whose death the war will start. One might get the impression that this is coercion. But no, a clan makes you unique, makes your path unique. It helps you answer the question, why you? And what you choose to do in the connotation given by your family is your choice. The Rockefeller family has its crest, has its motto, dispelling darkness, has an inner great contract with Prometheus. The older Rockefellers are philanthropists, and they spend water in third world countries, build hospitals, build schools. They rebel against death, against starving Africa. They are fighting for what is commonly called the rise of Africa. The middle Rockefellers have made a vaccine for HIV and are creating a cancer vaccine. And the younger Rockefeller is in the arts and opposes the death of modern art. When circumstances are such that your infrastructure ownership is the only thing you have, you will spend all your resources building huge houses, tiling your clan. But it will all end when your life ends. Rituals are most effective in building relationships in any organization. We become friends with those with whom we share rituals. This begs the question, what are rituals? To answer that question, you have to ask another question. Do you only celebrate calendar rituals, that is the ones you've been given, or do you celebrate your victories and special dates? Do you choose what to celebrate and what not to celebrate? A strong company with a strong corporate culture celebrates corporate victories. A weak company celebrates calendar holidays. The conclusion is simple. Create your own holidays. Rituals bring people together like nothing else. In addition, when you start building a clan, you are obliged to choose the founding fathers. What's the upside? You get a founding day, a holiday, a key point, a point of reference. The weakness of most relationships that people call family stems from the fact that we, when starting a romantic relationship, most often think in market terms. While looking for a relationship, we either want to improve our parameters, or, if we feel the parameters are already high enough, we try to increase our sample of potential partners. Going to the library, going to the gym, visiting a psychologist. We perceive it as improving our own parameters in order to attract people with higher parameters of beauty, intelligence, mental health. To increase the sample, people volunteer, attend cultural and business events. Someone moves to a big city or flies to islands. The problem is that people are struggling to find that one partner. The thing is, people don't want to work on relationships. They step on the same rake time after time after time. But relationships are really an activity of equals, meaning those who decide everything at the table. A group decision-making process is mandatory. When setting out to develop your relationship, you must focus on processes, not parameters or sampling. You have an obligation to think about rituals, values, and what you as a family ultimately produce. What food chain are you embedded in, and who needs your product of activity? A romantic relationship at the start is a constant activity together. But over time, the hormones pass, and without shared rituals, without shared processes, the relationship begins to break down. Families, then clans, and then dynasties are created not for the sake of biological immortality, but for the sake of ideological immortality. Following the idea of love makes you human. Creating relationships used to be a matter of course, but today, because of globalization, digitalization, the epidemic of loneliness is increasing. In the past, children used to be allowed to walk in the yard. There they independently began to build different relationships with different people. They started to fight with some people, with others they became friends. In adolescence, they started romantic relationships with some people. Today, the environment in which a child is brought up seems to be sterilized. The child is played with by the parents. And if a child wants to have contact with another child, parents start to prevent it. In state kindergartens and schools, there have always been many children and few teachers. And accordingly, socialization took place. Ego, one's own I, was formed. Here, we should remember Freud's models of psyche. There is the it, I, and over-I. The it, unconscious, natural part of the psyche, representing a certain reservoir of tensions and urges. Over-I is also an unconscious system, which is formed under the influence of upbringing and represents the images of parents. It is not just upbringing and a system of prohibitions, but also a system of identifying oneself with one's parents, forming one's own ideal I. The function of the I is to control energy flows, to react to the pressure of the two unconscious systems. The peculiarity of the I is that it is conscious. In this scheme, the I is even more obvious than before and appears to be secondary and derivative in relation to the unconscious. The layer of the I that contains your personality is, on average, underdeveloped in modern man. Modern man has a strong over-I that is programmed by parents, teachers, and educators. And there is the it, the animal beginning, the biological basement. Sometimes, because a person is not left alone, because he does not have enough contact with his peers, he simply cannot form his own ego, his I. The absence of one's own I, The gaping inner emptiness can always be used by someone. How you are erased from eternity is what we are going to talk about. In his The Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel describes what happens to modern man, who is taken advantage of by corporations and states. Let's go back 1,000,000 years. Before our ancient ancestors' eyes, lightning struck a tree and it caught fire. At first, our ancient ancestor was frightened. But then something about this frightening light interested him. Man began to lust after fire, its heat, and its power. Everything that man begins to lust after, he tries to instrumentalize. The desire to possess allows man to tame fire, but one day something quite different happens. Man looks at another man. The thought of using him somehow creeps into his head. He begins to lust after him, but lust after him as a tool. This man decides to go all the way. He claims leadership and forcefully gains fear from the weaker man. The strong man becomes a master and the weaker man, if he survives, becomes a slave. The master then begins to use the slave for his own safety. The slave begins to protect the master from other people. The master uses his slave as a counterpole. Like fire stops fire, the slave stops nature in its path to the master. Let's imagine this picture. The slave is a gardener who is forced to devote all his free time to the master's garden. Day in and day out, the gardener has to struggle with weeds, with the ever-changing shape of the bushes. The Lord simply doesn't have to take care of it. He gets free time, a resource of attention. He gets a chance to think, to sit by the fireplace with a book, to talk to his family and friends, to start planning something, to start creating. The slave is dependent on the master, and he recognizes this dependence. One day in his life, there appears a clear goal: to overcome his dependence on the master, to become equal to him, to throw off the shackles of slavery. Because nothing else can stop him except these very shackles. The slave's existence becomes dynamic. The existence of the master after seizing power, on the contrary, is adynamic. He has no prospective goal in front of him. All he strives for is the preservation of the current state of affairs, the defense of his status as master. After all, he has no choice. He either remains a master, or ceases to be one, or perishes. At the same time, if the slave depends on the master because of his fear and strives to overcome this dependence, the master also depends on his slave, because only the presence of the slave makes him the master. This strong two-way dependence makes the master the slave of his slave. Modern masters, learned from the bitter experience of the revolution of the past, understand perfectly well that they are obliged not to let their slaves realize their slave position. In the context of the present, labor makes the slave objectively better. He becomes stronger, acquires real skills and experience. The slave is physically able to walk away from his master or even kill him. In the best case for his master, the slave can simply run away for another life and will not stage a bloody revolution. But even in this seemingly good scenario, the master is left in a very vulnerable position. Left without slaves, it turns out that the master doesn't know how to cook, earn, negotiate, or solve real problems. To some extent, Hegel has helped masters from all over the world to realize their slave position and work on their mistakes. This is why a master remains a slave to his slaves. To maintain his dominance, the master has to take care of his slaves, the staff, his citizens. To maintain his position, the master has to make the bloody revolution disadvantageous to the slave. He must give him some benefits so that he has something to lose. But more importantly, he must fill the slave's mind with the right information, a certain narrative, propaganda. Thus, the constant cycle of oppression and revolution is replaced by balance. With the emergence of mass culture, the war for attention, the war for consciousness begins. Anything can be sold today. Today you are erased from eternity not by hard work, but by marketing and propaganda. That is why for independence, it is necessary to form your ideal, to create for yourself a sun to which you, as a plant, could stretch throughout your life, and infect others with this aspiration. But all this is impossible without such a thing as sovereignty. Do you think you have sovereignty? What do I mean by that? Do you have a space that no one can invade? Any clan or dynasty always has sovereignty, its own protected space. Families, as units of society, do not have sovereignty. Any family today can be invaded by the guardianship service, by the police. You can be forced to vote or mobilize. What do clans and dynasties do historically? They accumulate sovereignty and expand it. In the state system for a family, sovereignty is to be included in the law as an exception. This status is usually possessed by the elite, a privileged group that occupies leading positions in power structures. But sovereignty can be possessed not only by the elite, but also, say, by the homeless. The homeless have proto-sovereignty. They do not pay taxes. They are on the territory of the country and can earn good money at the subway crossing, asking for alms. And in some countries, they also receive an allowance. In addition, if a homeless person approaches you, you will try to move away so that you are not near them, meaning they will take your space. All of this is nothing but power, the ability to not fall under any restrictive norms. The homeless are inscribed in the life of the city and the whole country on the rights of exception. One can think of his High Sparrow from Game of Thrones, who, being homeless, rises to become the leader of a very influential religious cult throughout King's Landing. Historically, sovereignty was gained after one of the group's members was banished. The banish was primarily legal. In the Roman word, it was called a ban. Now you realize how long the roots of this now popular word on the internet are. A person sent to the ban as a despicable person was forbidden to be fed and could not even be interacted with. Such a person had only two options, either to die or not to die. Why was there such a harsh choice? Because a person sent to the ban for society ceased to exist. If you choose not to die, you begin to smell bad and turn into a homeless madman with whom no one wants to deal. Everyone shuns you. Such people often choose to leave the settlement and try to survive outside of it. They start living in the forest, hunting or eating scraps. But some decide to steal, to rob passers-by, former fellow citizens. Having crossed this line, the outcast becomes a bandit forever. A bandit with leadership qualities gathers a group of other bandits and one day decides to return to the settlement in order to establish his order there. So the bandit takes over and starts robbing people, enriching his gang. However, as time passes, the bandit realizes that sooner or later other bandits will come to rob this settlement, and he makes a fateful decision to defend this particular settlement. The bandit orders his men to stop openly and haphazardly robbing the peasants and imposes taxes. He and his men begin to defend the peasants, after which the bandit turns into a king. That is, by and large, a legalized bandit. The ruler builds a state machine around himself, whose task is to direct human flows, to send someone to war or to prison, to force someone to work in the fields. And one day the ruler has children who are destined to inherit all this. At one time, similar scenarios were played out by literally every civilization on Earth. The point of this story is that it illustrates two fundamental types of power: establishing power and established power. These are two different types of power. One power is absolute, the other is limited. He who has the establishing power can create different types of relationships and organizations, institutions and rules, laws and norms. He can work with the very fabric of statehood. He can build a rigid vertical that generates hierarchy. It can confine people to laws. Whereas established power only gives you certain freedoms, opportunities that you can use. Thus, three sectors appear in the law: the white zone, the zone of your freedoms, the zone of what you can, the gray zone, when you can violate, but not much, something legal and illegal at the same time, and the black zone, the zone outside any laws, norms, institutions. This is the territory of sovereignty. It used to be much easier to answer the question, why do I need a family? Why do I need children? It was a question of survival. Due to changes in living conditions, the perceptions of male and female roles have been transformed over time. The image of the male breadwinner is slowly dissolving. Men used to go hunting, then they started to go to work. Now a man can earn money without leaving his apartment and help a woman raise a child. The woman was the sole keeper of the hearth, and today she has cleaning services and deliveries. Today, we are in a lordly position because progress has allowed people to forget about survival, about hard work, and to think about life, to begin to reflect, to think about where we are coming from and where we are going. Allowed us to ask ourselves, what kind of world am I building and what kind of world am I destroying? What, together with our family, are we creating? Thank you for watching. And as always, a special thanks to the sponsors. What do you think about the theme of the video? Write in the comments.